Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are making a birthday card for a family member. I've been distracted lately, and this particular family member is absolutely going to recognize that that is a common household theme for us. We definitely get distracted. I get distracted by ideas. I'm writing a book. I'm writing lesson plans, I paint, and my husband gets distracted with all of his hobbies. And so sometimes when we're supposed to call or visit somebody, we just get distracted by life. And so this family member absolutely is going to recognize that I got distracted. So because I've been distracted by some books that I'm writing, I had trouble coming up with an idea for today's painting. And so one of the things that I sometimes do when I have a general direction that I want to go, but I don't have the pinpointed idea, I will put some constraints into AI and just pitch an idea. So these, and I'm not going to share those constraints because those are what make my paintings unique, but um, I'll say these are the types of things that I want to cover in this painting, and it'll give me an idea for a direction. So today it just said something to do with mountains, and I'm like, hey, I'm on board with that. I can paint some mountains. So that is where today's painting will go. So I'm going to have a mountain theme for this family member. Now, mountains are not my strong suit, so I am using a reference painting that I made, and I don't want to show the reference painting only because it was a painting that I did while reading somebody else's book, and so I didn't want to necessarily, um, show their stuff, but I did get the idea from somebody else's book. Um, Obviously, the painting ended up being my own work, but um, yeah, so we're gonna start with a mountain painting. So in my reference painting, I want kind of a darker blue than what I did in the painting. And I made previously, I've made color charts of so I can get ideas for the color I generally want to go. And in this example, I discover that the combination of phthalo blue and cad red medium, so a little bit of white, 50-50 white, that is the kind of a neutral tone that I would like. So anytime that you're mixing a warm color with a cool color, it turns into a little bit more of a neutral color. So if I mixed a cool red with a cool blue, it's going to give me a cool purple. If I mix a warm red with a warm blue, it's going to give me a warm purple. But when I start mixing the warm red with the cool blue, I get more of a neutral blue, like almost like brownish, grayish, neutral. And that's what I wanted for this particular painting. The mountains are going to be the focus of this painting, so I wanted the background to be very neutral. So my reference photo actually is, or my reference painting uses diagonal brushstrokes, which I thought was pretty conflicting with the angles of the mountains. So I went with horizontal brushstrokes, and immediately I could see that um, the blue was too it had too much coverage. So I wanted to add some depth to the sky. So I'm adding some white. You can see that my brush started falling apart while I was painting this. And yeah, I don't know why this particular brush is falling apart. I almost need duct tape or something because I really like this brush. It's a really nice brush, but it just keeps falling apart on me. But I'm adding some white to add depth to the sky. And also in my reference photo, there's a little bit of yellow in the sky, and I'm not sure why, but I like blue by itself is a cool color, even though this is a neutral blue. I liked the idea of adding just a little bit of light yellow to the sky to give it just a little bit more warmth, because these are going to be very, cold, harsh mountains. And so just a little bit of warmth in the sky. And so I'm using, I believe, so titanium white is what I use, but cad yellow medium is what I have. It's kind of a nice warm yellow. One thing that I'm not sure if you can tell from the video, but the water or the card that I'm painting on, the cardstock that I use is watercolor paper, and it's super absorbent. And so everything gets kind of sticky on the paper. It dries really, really quickly. Um, and I'm also in this painting video, I'm painting with a broken thumb. So trying to open up the paints and everything is kind of humorous along with my random broken paintbrush. So it is definitely it's definitely a kind of a humorous video. And the family member I'm painting this for, he definitely has a sense of humor and he'll find the humor in all of this. So next I'm going to be sketching in the mountains, and I've said this in a previous video, but it's very nice to sketch in with white paint. This is a skill I've learned from multiple painting instructors and classes, various classes that I've taken. Um, Not the greatest with mountains. I enjoy hiking them. I enjoy looking at them. I'm just not the greatest at painting them. So I definitely want to sketch these out with some white paint, kind of build the mountains from there. Uh, I am not going to try to make a perfect mountain. I'm not going to try to make a mountain that like actually looks like an actual place. These are just, essentially triangles to me at this point. It's important for me to distinguish between kind of making a realistic mountain and making the idea of a mountain. I used to take classes from an instructor who used to identify as a recovering perfectionist. And I thought that was such a good description. So many artists that I run across are really just creative people that aren't even artists. And um, it's it's very easy for perfectionism to creep into art to the point where we just don't even create art because we're so worried that we're going to make a mistake. And you know, I definitely see that, social media, heck, I'm on YouTube right now, but I can see social media definitely magnifying some of those fears of, screwing up very visibly where everybody can see you. And, if you're one of those people that's watching my video and you're thinking of art as a career, um, there's a lot higher stakes. Like this is just a hobby for me. The stakes are high because this is a card for somebody that's important to me, but it doesn't, it's not affecting my job or my reputation. And if these mountains turn out perfect. So that gives me a lot of freedom to experiment and try. And that's also part of the reason painting is such an important hobby for me because if it doesn't work, I can paint over it. My job's not tied to it. My reputation isn't tied to it. Um, so it's a very fun outlet for me. So I've got the mountains sketched in with some paint, and you can see that the brushstrokes are not perfect. You can also see that blue coming through from the background in the sky. Um, I did not intentionally use the messy brushstrokes for this. I just do that when I'm sketching. However, this next step, I'm going to be adding in the ridge lines for the mountains. And I kind of unconsciously am using those messy brush strokes as a guide for where to draw the lines. When I start this, and you should be able to see it, I try to make the lines too perfectly zigzaggy, and that looks weird because mountains aren't perfect and they're not perfectly zigzaggy. And so I also have to, kind of try with a couple different brushes to get these zigzaggy lines to work out. But it's kind of an interesting lesson in itself to you know, if I had made this original mountain sketch perfectly clean and uniformly white, I wouldn't have had these little messy marks to work with. And that imperfection is what kind of inspired and helped me and gave me the opportunity to make the ridge lines. And, I think that that's kind of one of those true outside of painting lessons for you that we do things, we're like, well, that's not right. But then it's that one thing that we did that wasn't exactly right that gives us the opportunity to do something new or different or something that's even better. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's a good life lesson on perfectionism to just kind of accept that things aren't always perfect and then using those little imperfections to as like a starting point for a new idea or project. So when I started drawing in those mountains, they definitely just looked like a line of triangles. The ridges looked like zippers, and now they're starting to look like actual mountains, like an actual mountain range. And So the next step is to add a midtone. So I've got that dark line, that dark ridge line, and it needs to blend a little bit more smoothly into the snow. So I'm going to make a midtone. And I've got Payne's Gray. I have Mars Black somewhere in my studio, but I seem to have lost it. So I just grabbed the next open bottle of blackish paint that I had. So we're going with Payne's Gray. And I'm also mixing in that blue from the sky so that, that shadow is going to look almost like a reflection. Now, it does take me a few times to get it light enough where it blends, like it's not dark like the ridge line, but it's not dark like the sky. It's going to be somewhere in between there. And so that does take a little bit of mixing to get that. Once I get that color kind of mixed, I'm going to start being a little bit more abstract with my brush strokes. It's almost like a dry brush. And I want a little bit of that light blue gray to travel into the dark, and I want it to travel into the snow. So definitely not perfect or uniform because when we're looking at the mountains, they are definitely not uniform or perfect. I want to see that those streaks, those variations, I want it to feel like, like it's snowpack and there's rocks shooting out of it and there's shadows and um, it's a living, breathing mountain range. And for somebody like myself who has perfectionist tendencies, um, I mean, those were probably cured in junior high, but uh, this is actually easier for me to do. So instead of thinking to myself, I have to make this entire mountain perfect, I can just think, okay, right now I just need to get the mid-tone shadows done for the whole painting. And so then I move on really, really quickly through the painting so I don't get hung up on one mountain. I'm actually trying to just get one color on the canvas at a time. And then it makes it go faster. I don't get that kind of like frozen feeling that you get when if you're a perfectionist, you know what I'm talking about. Um, so, but then what I can do, so once I've got the midtones, then I can go back and I can kind of clean up a little bit of the darker tones, but not too much. Again, the idea is abstract. Um, I did not know when I started this video that I was going to be giving a lesson on how to beat perfectionism, but that is what this turned out to be today. So up until this point in the video, I've really focused on how you know, I'm I have those perfectionist tendencies. I I want things to look really good. I have been kind of, without thinking of it, delaying gratification. So it really pleases me when things are working out, maybe not perfectly, but just working out really well. And so this part of the painting is where I get to be a little bit of a perfectionist. I'm adding the white snow line to the ridge and it's bright white, so it gives that impression of perfection. I very much love the bright white of snow, and it's creating crisp, clean lines. It does blend into the other colors, but this is where I start to really look at each individual mountain, and I'm starting to clean up some of those lines, and this is where being a perfectionist is helpful. I get to clean up the mess that I made. So the majority of the painting was actually spent on being imperfect, getting it on canvas or watercolor paper, and just getting it on, getting the paint on the paper and nothing more. And now is kind of that fine tuning and that's the kind of thing that being a perfectionist is about, is those fine tune, those details. So it's actually very fun for me to watch this. Obviously I painted it and then I talk through my painting and then I re-record my voiceover so that you don't have to sit here for an hour watching me paint. But the perfectionist tendency, sometimes people view that as a weakness in themselves. And this is where I get to tell you, like, this is actually a really cool skill. You get to have this skill of being able to see, you know, very fine details that maybe other people can't see, and you're the person that gets to come in and fix and clean and work on those details. And that's really important. And it's an important skill to have. And, sometimes it does feel like it takes over and it's a little bit crushing. But right now, today, in this example, you get to be the person that kind of finalizes and perfects this picture. So the next step is to add the moon, the light source, and we can see that all the bright colors are on the right side. So I'm going to add a moon to right side, I learned this technique of taking a flat brush and kind of squishing it into a circle, and that's it. That's all it takes to make a moon in the sky. The trickiest part is this is watercolor paper, so it's super absorbent and it's drying so quickly, and the brush is like getting hung up on the dry paint, and it does make it a little bit more difficult. There are tons of videos on amazing painting artists on YouTube that make moons, and they're so gorgeous. And I love painting moons. I tend to make mine look like almost like a rose. So when you look at it when it's dry, it kind of circles around the middle. It definitely looks like you're looking into a rose, and that's kind of just how I've made my roses or my moons in the past. So I'm definitely getting Colorado vibes. I did some research down in Southwest Colorado and when I was an undergrad, researching avalanches, and this landscape reminds me of, February nights in Silverton, Colorado. So happy birthday to my family member. I hope you enjoyed watching me figure out this mountain scene. And if you're somebody who struggles with perfectionists, I hope that you get something out of this painting also. You don't always have to know what you're doing. It doesn't have to be perfect the first brush stroke. Sometimes the messy brush strokes are where we get those opportunities that make something amazing, or those mistakes give you the next idea. Um, so we're going to move on before I stop this video, and I'm going to show you kind of bonus content that I almost never put on video. So I always have extra paint whenever I make birthday cards or I'm making intuitive paintings, and I really don't like the idea of putting perfectly good paint in the garbage or down the drain. And so I started putting my leftover paint into a notebook, and I have quite a few notebooks with extra paint that I just plop into the notebook. And so part of this actually came from kind of a fun family story. My great grandma made a painting for her wedding day and gave it to my great grandpa. And somehow I ended up with this painting, this family heirloom, and it looked like it had been through some pretty rough times. So I had it restored. And the woman who restored the painting took the leftover paints that she had used and turned it into an abstract little painting. And then it was a thank you card. And I thought that was such a clever use of the old paint. And so now I do that on my own. So this painting is essentially what I call garbage paint. So I'm going to try to make something out of it. So in my previous painting, I had a bunch of extra purples and blues and reds, and I painted them on full canvases. I think I have like 4 or 5 of these full canvases with mixes of blues and reds and purples. And so I have quite a range of colors on my palette for this painting. So I am going to kind of intentionally lay these down. Sometimes if I just have a very limited palette left, I'll just abstractly put colors down on canvas or a mixed media page. But I can see what to me is starting to look like the colors I could use for like a sky or horizon. And so I'm going to start with the yellow or the white in the middle, and then the light yellow, and then medium or that dark yellow. And then I'm going to add the red on top, which is very, very dark and overpowering. The yellow itself doesn't cover the paper very well. Yellow is, it needs that white to get some good coverage. And so then when I start mixing in that red, it gets that good coverage and it starts to look a little bit like a sunset. So then the next step is to just do the same thing with what's left of the blue. So all the red tones are used up. I'm going to use the blue tones next. So I start with that very light color blue, adding a little bit of water to it to blend it into that white line, and just moving to the darker colored blues and blacks. So I wasn't necessarily looking for a landscape scene when I put these paints on, but I can start to see that there's definitely a horizon line. So I'm gonna just, saved a little bit of that black and made it a horizon line. This is very difficult because all of the paint on this piece of paper it's very thick, it's very wet. Everything is blending together. um, that's part of this process of preserving some of these paints is that, it just doesn't always work the way that you want it to. As I'm doing that, I can see that it looks a little bit like maybe some kind of geographic feature at sunset. So like it's it's not gonna be water. There's no red reflecting on the ground. So maybe it's just ground. And so I'm just making some very loose brush strokes that kind of give the idea of ground, you know. And as I said before, it gets very difficult because towards the bottom of this painting, the paint is very chunky and very, very wet and it's hard to blend. So as I am looking at this paint, I have a lot of black paint left, and so I'm gonna just throw a tree off onto the side. The tree, you can see as I'm drawing it, is collecting and picking up a lot of that blue paint, a little bit of red paint. Some of the paint is starting to dry, so the brush is getting sticky as it's getting hung up on the wet paint. Um, but just kind of going in, and it works really well to just kind of to let those colors mix and blend. We know that this palette mixes and blends really well because that's the palette I used for the birthday cards. So the colors are going to work well together. It's just a matter of being able to brush over sticky paint. So right about now in this painting, I am getting Dr. Seuss vibes from this scene, and I still have a little bit of black paint, so I'm gonna make like little trees in the background. And on those little trees, I have this light blue paint and then the dark phthalo, the regular phthalo, and then some black. And essentially, I'm just going to use those as leaves for the trees. And that's where it gets the Dr. Seussy vibes that this is, it's not a realistic picture. It's very abstract. But it's just using the colors that I have and those light, like the idea of light blue foliage against that bright orange sky. It just looks like it would go well together. So up until this point, I've never signed any of these little throwaway garbage paintings that I make in my notebook. They just kind of sit on a shelf. So I think that's a good lesson for even for myself. I'm still learning that every work isn't necessarily a masterpiece, and it doesn't have to become a product. It doesn't have to get sold, but it's sometimes just fun to create. And I think it's good for myself to sign and date these paintings and make them into something fun. So that is the end of today's video. You got the mountain birthday card plus a little bonus lesson in, you know, what to do with leftover paint. Completely unplanned conversation about perfectionism and, what to do when painting with a broken brush and a broken thumb. So kind of a very productive video for today. Remember to like and subscribe. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in the next video.